やば、秒でピンチなんだけど。
And look, it's every Walmart worker around this time of the year. Seriously, pray for their poor souls. Continuing right from where we left off last week, Neville and Suga were having their secret evil meeting, where, not surprisingly, the former was providing the latter with his supplies, which included the Grand Newt organ that he transplanted into Hanto. He provided him with another one, and later in the episode, Suga would end up giving him samples of what his brother was using to gain his superpowers. Though, notably, it also giving him some pudding, which, as far as we know, Shoma still hasn't eaten. Thus, he was probably the first member of the Stomach family to try the favorite treat of squirrel girls and game goddesses alike. And while he seemed to genuinely like it, he also decided to put some on a freaking petri dish, likely so that he could create his own artificial gochuzo. That, combined with the organ he gave to Suga, seemed to suggest that they might try to make a pudding rider. I wonder who in this cast would look good in pudding-colored yellow. Honestly though, I'm looking forward to making Himari squirrel pudding from that series because that was actually my favorite treat from Kira Kira. Meanwhile, Shoma was doing a little reading, specifically The Gift of Magi by O. Henry. It's that one Christmas story that you've probably heard a million times. You know, the one where the couple ends up giving gifts to each other after selling off items that were meant to complement said items. Personally though, while that story is wholesome and everything, I also kind of found it pretty dumb. Like, I get the message and everything, it's the thought that counts, and that true love will be able to overcome material possessions and all that. But at the same time, the guy sold off his precious watch that he might never get back. Meanwhile, the lady just sold off her hair that will eventually grow back, thus the combs that he got for her will eventually become useful. I'm just saying, it just doesn't feel all that equal. Still, at least Sachiko was able to explain the message to Shoma, who figured he should try to do the same for his friends. And while there's likely nothing more he could give to his female friend, his partner rider could probably use something, thus he later gave him the Yule Log Gochuzo. Considering that y'all use those things for your survival, I'm pretty sure that's one of the most caring gifts possible. On that note, I both kind of laughed and yet also felt a little bit of empathy when I saw this very brief change to the opening where Sita disappears next to her brother, and because it was a layered effect, Jeep had no reaction and just played out like normal. That's low-key insanely cruel, yet also kind of hilarious. Anyway, the Crab Grand Newt was down on his luck as his haul didn't warrant him even a single dark treat. Thus, he decided to try something different with our heroes, starting by literally playing within ear range of the two as they were working the lottery with Sachika. Oof, it must be really bad if it's coming out of that stomach. Actually, what would it look like if it were to come out from... You know what, never mind, forget I asked anything. They pursued him, and interestingly enough, the Grand Newt chose to follow Shoma while he was looking for him, and even purposely got his attention. Thus, the rider gave him the usual ultimatum, and of course the villain answered with... Okay, aside from the obvious comedy there, I also kind of like to read into Shoma's character at this point. The fact that he almost habitually attacked the guy suggested that he's expecting the Grand Newts to always say no at this point. Like, I might be overthinking it, but deep down, maybe Shoma's kind of lost hope for anyone who works for the Stomach family to give up their evil ways. If that is the case, then under that sweet exterior might be one of the most cynical Kamen Rider ever. Though to be fair, he also wasn't wrong to feel that way when they said stuff like this. Thus, it did kind of put Shoma in a tough spot, as if this guy really did want to reform, should he even be given that chance, as even if he sucks at his job, the fact remains that this guy has worked for the Stomachs for 20 years, suggesting that he might have quite the victim list. But yet, do these writers even have the right to pass such judgments on guys who don't even want to fight anymore? Especially when they're just cogs in the much bigger machine that is the Stomach company. This resulted in a great debate between Shoma and Hanto, who both brought up good points, while one was still hiding a few secrets from the other. Still, great stuff where we were able to see both sides, and while I do kind of side more with Hanto, especially by the end of this episode, this still acted as a great character piece for Shoma. I mean, at this point, we're just one step away from going straight to the courtroom and...
僕人は前に出てください。
Did anyone put something weird in my brownies? But yeah, this is that one junkie dude who Nibble had been modifying for the past few episodes. You could kind of tell he was going to become a significant character, as one, his suit actor was Eitoku, aka the most prolific secondary writer for this franchise, as well as the main writer from last season, and two, his human form was Kirame Silver. Jeez, Takamichi fell from royalty about as hard as, well, really, most of the British royal family. Also, I didn't realize this, but the Crab Granute was being played by Stinger, aka Sasori Orange from Q Ranger. And honestly, I didn't realize it because I haven't really watched Q Ranger. Anyway, Log 9 here had gotten some pretty significant upgrades, most notably the ability to inject his victims with what seemed to be some kind of ecstasy that put them in a trance-like state of bliss that both produced the happiness spice and made them easy targets to capture. Okay, so I just have one question. Would that count as artificial flavoring? Oh, come on, I was just curious! But yeah, just as a quick little reminder, Kamen Rider is totally a kid's show. Meanwhile, the ever so slightly less terrifying Junkie Sentai seemed to be in trouble, though we already saw a scene where this dude met with Jeep, so it was kind of obvious what was coming. Though, I did like this little touch of the agent literally pushing him along. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, like Shoma did, that didn't have to be included, but they did, and it's kind of clever. But yeah, as you can guess, this dude was a lying a-hole, which I'm a little disappointed by, as it would have been interesting to further explore the idea of a Granude who genuinely wanted to quit, but it at least led to this awesome moment for Shoma. Moreover, we got to see this writer's version of Ichika's favorite ability. In this case, he could create whip warriors augmented with his Gochizo's powers. They still weren't particularly strong, especially compared to the siblings agents, but at least they weren't totally goofy, rainbow-puking mooks. Anyway, Stinger Crabs tried to make a run for it, but Hanto intercepted him. However, the addition of a couple more of Jeep's agents overwhelmed him, and he even managed to steal Shoma's gift for him. The main writer himself soon joined in, and again, he seemed to be a bit drained from the Keikochizo, which I guess is a way of balancing out the extra strength of that form. And thus, the episode kind of ended on a bit of an awkward place for a cliffhanger, because even weekend, it's kind of obvious that Choma is going to save Hanto. Still, this is a really solid episode that managed to establish several new status quos. From the beginning stages of the season's tertiary writer's creation to a terrifying new subgeneral, there was a lot going on in this one episode. You could almost say there was a little too much here, which did lead to a bit of a lack of focus in certain areas, but really, if this also helps to pick up the pace in future episodes, well, it's a small sacrifice to be made, really. There was always going to be a significant amount of fallout following the events of the last episode, and yet this episode took things in different, and yet not unwelcome directions. Sure, it did mean that Jeep ended up getting a lot less focus, but one, it was justified as he's still in shock over his sister's death, and two, I do think we kind of should move on from the twins after they just got a whole arc to themselves. In this case, it seems like we're mostly moving into the beginning stages of the introduction of the third rider for the season, who, at this point, I'd actually be surprised if it's not going to be Sachika. However, until then, we also got stuff like the introduction of a new, stronger part-timer with one of the most off-putting abilities for any monster in this franchise, as essentially he was roofing his victims. They even took some time to ask some important questions about morality for our riders. Yeah, obviously, a relative of Eugene Krabs was always going to be a self-serving, greedy bastard, but it also does now raise the question on what would Shoma do against a part-timer who was willing to quit and maybe even have a shorter rap sheet than this guy. For now though, I'm honestly just kind of tired of this dude, especially after we got introduced to a much more interesting subgeneral, so I'm actually looking forward to moving on from this mini-arc, which I think we will, as the seeds have been planted for some far more interesting developments. And overall, this is a solid in-between episode before the next major story arc. Next week, hopefully they'll cook that crab, and maybe the hardworking Sachika will soon get her pudding after a slightly painful surgery. Thank you for watching, and jeez, it's only 10 days away until Christmas. No joke here, I just really want to point that out. I mean, for me, it's not a big deal as I live on my own and I just visit the family for the holidays, but I still do hope that, unlike Sachika, things aren't too busy for y'all. Look forward to the holidays, I should say. And until next time, though, farewell for now, my friends, and, I need to get more milk.